Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Felix here with your Word on the Street. And today we're going to be continuing our study into the book of the Revelation of Jesus Christ, specifically getting into an area where we look into the power behind what is known as the religious Babylon, which is also known as the false religion. So we're also taking a small look at the beast during this time frame as well, okay? So we have to remember that when Jesus comes back to earth, he's bringing righteousness with him. But before that can happen, a few things need to be done. First, all of the godless and evil armies of the world have got to be destroyed. And we saw that in chapter 16. And then second, all of the false religions have to be destroyed. And this is what we're going to be continuing in our study here in chapter 17. And then lastly, the evil and unrighteous politics and governments and the mega social systems of this world are going to be destroyed. And that's going to be coming up next in chapter 18. So when these three institutions are destroyed, then all of the ungodly and the evil of the earth are going to be removed, and Jesus will come and then set up his kingdom of righteousness. And one thing to remember is this: false religions and evil godless governments have always been around. The ending of these institutions will complete the ending of the Antichrist and his false prophet and the total annihilation of their governments and their Babylon. So for those who have been hurt and abused by false religions, they know firsthand how destructive that it can be. By its deceptions, false promises, false securities, and false hopes, false religions have told more lies to billions of people since the beginning of man and led them astray to hell. And this is the reason why the Holy Spirit is addressing this with John to write in Revelation, to warn us of the religious Babylon that not only has invaded the hearts of so many people, but even more so at the end of time. So let's open up our Bibles to Revelation chapter 17, verses 7 to 18, in a teaching entitled, The Meaning of the Woman and the Beast. And here John writes, beginning in verse 7, he says, "But the angel said to me, why did I marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. So immediately here in this verse, John is telling us what the religious Babylon, the false religion, is. It's a mystery. We have to remember that in these end times here, that people who may have known of Jesus and followed him, or even those who have never known him, they will actually follow and honor leaders and governments and doctrines of the world instead of following God. And that to me is a mystery. With his own eyes, John sees people of the world following the false religion of the end of time. And the world, it's horrifying. The false religion is going to sweep up the people of the world, seduced in a sense of they're appealed to this false religion. But they will in turn follow the world government and see it as their provider and protector. Instead of not following either the false religion or of government, John saw millions getting slaughtered for their refusal. And this could be where the mystery begins, the need to not be killed. So instead, give up a sort of saving from God and instead take up following everything that is hypocrisy. But then the angel tells John that he will reveal to him the mystery of the details of the religious Babylon. And John continues in his writing, continuing in verse 8, he says that the beast that saw you, or that saw, is, and not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see that the beast that was and is not, and yet is. So this is the source of the evil power, what is known as the religious power of Babylon, the false religion. And it's going to be the Antichrist. So take a look at what John has been reminding us all throughout Revelation. He says in verse 9 that here is the mind which was wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And then in verse 10 he says that, and then there are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. So let's pick this little passage apart here, these 2 verses, okay? First in verse 9, we can see that the beast can be understood only by believers who are spiritually minded. They know him because they follow him and his evilness. And they're abiding in that way of life because they're focusing, they're listening, and they're following to his methods and his instructions. So he also sits on 7 mountains and is the leader of 7 different kingdoms. And it relates a little bit into verse 10, where John writes that there are 7 kings. But who are they? Who knows? Who knows? Probably the best way to describe who they are is to get into like the Old Testament and see all of those who have gone after and tried to take out God's people. Check it out. In verse 10, 5 of the kingdoms have fallen and do not exist in power any longer. We got places like Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece. And then one of the kingdoms still exists, and that's Rome. But John says that one has not yet come, and it's believed to be that empire would be a revival of the Roman Empire, or like a coalition of nations that were in the old Roman Empire. I mean, just look at like all the nations that have just risen against Israel in this past year in 2023 after Hamas invaded them. So the Antichrist is going to take over all of these nations, and when he does, it will be the fulfillment of the next part in verse 11, where John says that the beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th, and is the 7, and is going to perdition. So in verse 10, we see that he will be an all-powerful and all-evil person. They go through the process at the end of time that looks much like 3 separate stages of being. First, he's been in the past. He ceases to exist for some time. And then in verse 8, he says that he ascends out of the bottomless pit. And the question is he filled with an evil spirit, or is he incarnate? Who knows? But Scripture doesn't tell us, but we know that he is evil and that he's like satanic evil. He's the beast that is the 8th ruler in verse 11. So let's look at what John says here in verses 12 and 13. He says, "The 10 horns which you saw are then kings who have received no kingdom as yet, but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast." So these 10 horns and then 10 kingdoms of the power, they're going to be an ally with them, okay? And they will make war with Jesus in verse 14. John says that they will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them. For he is the Lord of lords and the King of kings, and those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's pretty awesome, a pretty cool title to be in amazing company with Jesus, to be chosen and faithful. So now in this final passage in verses 15 to 18, we see something pretty interesting here. We see the destruction of the religious Babylon, but by the political alliance that was formed up by the Antichrist. He is going to turn against the religious movement that was lured away from God onto himself. And with that political war machine that he created, he will then destroy all of those who followed the very same religion that he falsely convinced was to be followed. You know, John writes in the beginning of verse 15, he says, "And then he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are people, multitudes, nations, and tongues. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh and burn her with fire." And in verse 17, he continues that, "For God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman who you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth." So this passage shows us 3 major points. First, in verse 15, the false religion will have gained like a huge power and position at the end of time. A one world religion will hold up they're going to hold all the cards. And they're going to be supported by populations, nations, and not just in one place, but like all over the world. So people all over the world will be worshiping the image of the beast at the end of time. And then next in verse 16, we can see that the false religion will be destroyed by the Antichrist and all of that alliance of nations for 2 reasons: money and power. The power and the money will make him hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So the Antichrist used the false prophet to get him to get to the people under a one world religion and then destroyed them. And they will no longer have a need for a religion when the people are going to be following the state. So the issue is that religion holds all the power and money, and to have it, the Antichrist needs to destroy the prophet. So to become desolate, it means to take. All of the wealth and the power is going to be gone, and religion is going to be naked to the world, which is the reason why the state has to destroy it. By eating her flesh, nothing's going to be left of the false religion, because the state is actually going to come in there and take all of its resources for itself. And the only thing left from burning religion with fire is ashes. That's all that's going to remain of the false prophet and of the false religion is ashes. And then finally, the religion of Babylon is going to be destroyed because of God. In verse 17, John says, "For God has." God is God. He can do whatever he needs to do to allow the false religion to be destroyed. In fact, in verse 18, God even identified who the false religion was so that it could be of no surprise. The woman, the false religion, the state religion is the great city that rules and reigns over the leaders of the world. It's religion that will be the power that holds the loyalty of the people to the state for the Antichrist. And then once the Antichrist is ready to get rid of religion, that loyalty is going to come to the state, and he's going to take it and destroy religion while keeping control of the people and wealth. Revelation chapter 17, verses 7 to 18, the meaning of the woman and the beast, and that's your word on the street.